Most gardeners don't realize it until years in that not every seed deserves your soil. Some crops promise bounty but give you only frustration. They drink your water, steal your sunlight, and leave you wondering if maybe you've lost your touch. But it's not you, it's them. I've seen it again and again, kind, patient gardeners pouring their time and heart into plants that never meant to give much back. I learned that lesson myself one August morning years ago, standing in the quiet of my garden after another failed season with those fussy, high-maintenance plants I thought I needed. The air was heavy and warm, the kind that sticks to your skin. My knees ached from bending. My gloves were damp with effort. And there I stood looking over a row of sad, thirsty vegetables that just couldn't handle another southern summer. That's when I realized, sometimes the best thing you can grow is space. Space for better things, easier things, plants that meet you where you are. So today, I want to share something that took me far too long to learn: the 15 crops that simply aren't worth the sweat anymore. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll not only know which plants to quietly cross off your list, but I'll also share a handful of gentle replacements, the quiet keepers, as I like to call them. They don't demand much, yet somehow they give more color, more calm, more comfort. And if your hands are a little slower, if your back reminds you to take it easy these days, these swaps will help you keep your garden alive and thriving without wearing yourself down. Because the truth is, a good garden should bring peace, not pain. Now, if you're new here, welcome. I'm John Thornfield, and this is Golden Garden Days. This little corner of the internet is where we slow down together, breathe with the seasons, and remember that gardening isn't a race, it's a rhythm. If you love growing your own food, tending simple flowers, or just watching the morning light stretch across the soil, I'd be honored if you'd join me. Every week, I share stories and lessons that come straight from my hands, and heart lessons learned the slow way, out in the garden, where time still moves gently. So, go ahead and subscribe, and if you already have, welcome home, my friend. It's late summer as I record this, that tricky stretch of the season when the air hums with heat and the soil begins to tire. The tomatoes that once promised abundance are now heavy with blight, the basil's gone leggy, and those tender greens you planted in spring have long since bolted. This is the time when we gardeners begin to reflect not on what we grew, but on what grew us. The lessons buried in every mistake, every stubborn plant that wouldn't bend to our will. And that's why this video matters. Because the older I get, the more I see that gardening isn't about control, it's about relationship. Some crops are like old friends, they meet you halfway. Others, well, they drain you dry before the season's even done. So let's make a small promise to ourselves today. This year or next, we'll plant fewer crops, but better ones. We'll trade the needy for the easy, the brittle for the resilient. We'll focus on the joy of tending, not the exhaustion of keeping up. Because at this stage in life, gardening should fit you, your rhythm, your strength, your patience. Now, let's get into it. I'll start with the first kind of plant I tell every senior gardener to skip: the one that tricks you with beauty, then leaves you high and dry. This one fooled me for years, until I finally saw the truth written right in the soil. Crop 1. The water guzzler that betrays you. There's a certain kind of plant that looks honest when you set it in the ground. Its leaves spread wide, its vines eager to run, and you think, this one will reward me. But as the weeks pass, you realize it's not you tending the plant, it's the plant draining you. For me, that was cucumbers. I remember the summer I fought to keep them alive. The morning started early, the sun barely up, the hose in my hand as the cool water darkened the soil. But by noon, those same vines hung limp again, as if all that care meant nothing. I watered them twice a day, 3 times sometimes, only to harvest a handful of bitter fruit: cucumbers, squash, even melons. They're greedy drinkers. They guzzle every drop, then punish you when the well runs dry. For seniors who've learned the worth of conserving both water and strength, these crops just aren't worth the bargain. Instead, fill that space with sweet peppers or okra. Peppers don't complain about heat. They sip gently and keep giving right through the dog days. Okra, too, it stands tall, strong-backed, and patient. These plants let you breathe. They ask for less and give you more. just as good companions should. Crop 2. The delicate diva herb. Every gardener wants a little herb bed near the kitchen door, the scent of fresh greens on your fingertips, the ease of snipping what you need for supper. But some herbs don't make good housemates. Parsley, cilantro, even basil in high summer, they're all temperamental. They love you in the cool months. But the moment the heat settles in, they throw a fit. I've seen seniors hover over parsley with spray bottles, shade cloths, even umbrellas trying to keep it happy. And still it fades, as if offended by too much care. Gardening at our age shouldn't feel like chasing moods. The best herbs, sage, thyme, oregano, chives, are like old friends. They grow slow, steady, forgiving. I have a clump of thyme by my back steps that's weathered 10 summers. The rain beats it, the sun bakes it, and yet every spring it returns, fragrant and alive. That's the kind of reliability you come to cherish plants that stay, no matter what storms pass through. Crop 3. The fancy tomato trap. If gardening has heartbreakers, tomatoes are their king. Every one of us has fallen for them, those glossy catalog photos of purple skins, striped flesh, names like Brandywine and Green Zebra. I remember ordering a half-dozen heirloom varieties one spring, thinking I'd outsmart the weather. I built cages, mixed compost, even whispered encouragement. By July, half were diseased. The others split wide from too much rain. I harvested a few, sure, but the effort felt heavier than the reward. These fancy tomatoes are fragile, their vines tangle, their fruit cracks, and they catch blight like gossip. For seniors, the pruning, staking, and spraying just aren't worth the trouble. But that doesn't mean you must give up tomatoes entirely. Try compact or determinate types like patio princesses or better bush. They grow close to the ground, need little support, and fit neatly in raised beds. They ripen evenly, taste just as sweet, and never leave you frustrated. When you've lived enough seasons, you learn that smaller often means better, not because it looks grand, but because it lasts. Crop 4. The root that breaks your back. Carrots, parsnips, turnips, they're honest crops, but they demand hard labor. They need soft, deep soil, steady thinning, and careful digging. Most of us no longer have the wrists for constant weeding or the backs for kneeling that long. I once tried growing parsnips in a bed that was more clay than loam. Come harvest time, I knelt there, tugging until the muscles between my shoulders ached, half broke off in the soil, the rest twisted and gnarled. I remember thinking, I didn't retire to wrestle with roots. If you love root vegetables, look for those that rise easily. Radishes, for instance, they're fast, cheerful, and light. In just 3 weeks, you can pull a handful from the earth without strain. Green onions, too. Grow like friendly neighbors. Never pushy, always ready when you are. Gardening, after all, isn't about how deep you dig. It's about how easily you smile while doing it. Crop 5. The shade-shy green. Lettuce makes big promises in spring: soft leaves, quick growth, tender flavor. But as soon as the sun grows bold, it turns bitter and bolts, racing toward seed as if fleeing the heat. I've seen so many seniors try to stretch lettuce season, moving pots under trees, watering more often, building shade cloths. It's noble, but it's also needless. Lettuce isn't built for July, and that's fine. Instead, try plants that like a little challenge. Kale, mustard greens, and collards are survivors. They hold their color and taste even when the air feels heavy. Collards, especially, carry an old southern patience, steady, dependable, humble. I grow a row every year just to remind myself what endurance looks like. You can pick from them little by little, and they just keep giving. At a time in life when energy should be spent wisely, choose crops that stand strong without your constant tending. Crop 6. The bug magnet. You can almost hear them, the chewing, the rustling, the soft ruin of cabbage leaves under caterpillar jaws. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, they're all invitations to battle. They draw white moths, aphids, and every crawling thing your garden can muster. I used to stand out there, hand-picking worms with a coffee can beside me, feeling like I was losing a war. There's no shame in surrender. Gardening should bring peace, not conflict. Instead, plant allies, not enemies. Garlic and chives send pests packing. Marigolds brighten your beds while defending them. You'll notice, too, how your garden feels different when you make that shift. The air smells cleaner, the morning's quieter. There's relief in letting go of plants that fight you. We've all reached an age where our energy is too precious to waste on endless skirmishes. Let your garden be your sanctuary, not your battlefield. Crop 7. The annual that ages you. Each spring, the garden centers sparkle with flats of annuals, zinnias, petunias, beans, even cucumbers promising color and bounty. And each spring, I see seniors fill their carts, hopeful as children, ready to start fresh. But the truth is, starting over each year takes more out of you than you think. The bending, the planting, the waiting, it's joyful, yes, but also wearying. Perennials are the gardener's quiet allies. They remember you. They come back without fuss. My rhubarb bed has been with me longer than some friendships. Every May it rises again, red stems pushing through the cool earth, like a small greeting. Chives bloom beside it in soft purple clusters, the scent warm and familiar. They don't demand, they just exist, steady, predictable, loyal. The older I get, the more I see that permanence is its own kind of beauty. When your body slows, the garden doesn't have to. You just need plants that understand time the way you do, gently, cyclically, without hurry. When you reach this stage of life, it's not about how much you can grow, but how much peace your garden gives you. There's grace in letting go of what's too demanding, and wisdom in tending what fits your pace. Every crop you remove makes space for something more meaningful, a simpler joy, a lighter task, a quieter moment. Because gardening, like aging, is about knowing what to keep and what to release. Crop 8. The Space Hog. There's a quiet lesson in space in knowing how much to give and how much to keep. I used to plant sprawling pumpkins along my fence line, thinking their vines would stay polite. They didn't. By midsummer, they had taken half the garden, choking out my marigolds and covering the basil I'd so carefully placed. Those broad leaves seemed alive in their hunger, creeping outward every day. For seniors with smaller yards or raised beds, space is a gift. You shouldn't have to fight your own plants for room. Skip the spreaders, pumpkins, winter squash, even some melons, and grow compact varieties instead. Bush beans, dwarf zucchini, or container tomatoes give you abundance without chaos. You'll find it changes not just your garden, but your state of mind. There's something deeply satisfying about looking out and seeing order, clean soil lines, plants breathing easy, everything where it belongs. Crop 9. The Instagram illusion flower. Every spring, I see photos of picture-perfect gardens, flowers, staged just so, blooms edited brighter than real life. It's easy to believe you need those delicate, fleeting beauties like peonies that bloom for a week or ranunculus that demand constant pampering. I once planted an entire bed of dahlias, thinking I'd wake up to postcard mornings, and for a few days, I did. But by August, they were wilting, diseased, begging for more water, more feeding, more everything. The truth is, not all beauty is meant for every gardener. The flowers that last are the ones that work quietly. Coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, echinacea, zinnias, they don't fuss, they don't fade, and they'll bloom long after the camera's gone. Their beauty doesn't need attention to survive. It just is. For seniors who garden to soothe the spirit, not chase perfection, these are the flowers that keep your space and your heart steady. Crop 10. The Thorny Trouble. I remember planting blackberries one year along the back fence. I thought I was clever, making use of that strip of unused ground. But by midsummer, I learned why some beauty comes at a cost. The canes were wild and sharp, their thorns hooking into my sleeves as I tried to prune them. I came away, scratched and sore, wondering why I'd planted something that fought me every time I touched it. As we get older, our hands grow softer, our skin thinner. Gardening shouldn't leave scars. Skip thorny or aggressive plants, raspberries, blackberries, even roses if they're unruly. Choose gentle growers instead. Blueberries, strawberries, or thornless blackberry varieties that give sweetness without pain. There's no prize for the gardener who bleeds most. The only reward worth keeping is the quiet comfort of tending without fear. Crop 11. The overhyped superfood. It seems every year a new miracle crop makes headlines: quinoa, kale, though I love it, goji berries, microgreens. The promise is always the same. Grow this and you'll be healthier, happier, younger. I tried quinoa once it needed perfect soil, constant weeding, endless rinsing before it was even edible. I stood there one morning, hands on hips, looking at my tiny harvest and thought, this is madness. Gardening, at its best, nourishes body and soul not by following trends, but by growing what you'll actually eat and enjoy. Stick with the foods that have always loved you back. Leafy greens, sweet peas, green beans, or strawberries. They're dependable, forgiving, and full of quiet goodness. Seniors don't need to chase novelty. We need nourishment, the kind that asks little and gives plenty. Crop 12. The wind victim. Not all gardens are sheltered. In open spaces, the plains, the coast, or even a breezy hill wind can turn a tender plant into confetti. Corn, sunflowers, and tall beans may look striking, but they're fragile under pressure. I remember one storm that took my entire row of corn down in a single afternoon. I stood at the window watching, helpless, as each stalk bent and broke. At 65, I realized I didn't have the heart to stake and tie every fallen stem again, so I stopped planting what couldn't stand on its own. Instead, I filled that bed with herbs, low flowers, and leafy greens. When the next wind came, everything held. There's a lesson there, I think, about growing what can weather life's gusts without constant rescue. The garden teaches resilience, but it also teaches surrender. Sometimes, the kindest choice is to plant what stands steady. Crop 13. The fickle fruit tree. Fruit trees are beautiful in theory. The idea of harvesting apples or peaches from your own yard carries a kind of nostalgia, doesn't it? But few talk about the pruning, the spraying, the diseases that creep in when you turn your back. I once planted a peach tree near my shed, dreaming of baskets full of summer sweetness. For 3 years, it teased me, blooming with promise, then dropping fruit to the ground, half rotten before I could taste it. I finally dug it out, heart heavy but relieved. These days I grow smaller, simpler fruit. Blueberries in pots, strawberries in raised beds, even a dwarf apple that gives me just enough. Seniors don't need the burden of full-sized fruit trees. We need fruit that grows within reach, both literally and figuratively. The joy of a handful of berries outweighs the labor of a ladder any day. Crop 14. The soil snob. You can spot them right away, plants that look elegant, but only if the soil is perfect. Blueberries in the wrong pH, asparagus in clay, lavender in too much rain. They complain through yellowed leaves and stunted growth, asking for amendments and constant correction. I used to think gardening meant adapting to them. Now I know better. A good plant meets you halfway. Seniors shouldn't be hunched over soil tests and fertilizer charts. Choose crops that adapt: beans, peas, okra, even nasturtiums. They'll forgive a missed watering, a rough patch of soil, a week of neglect. Gardening should feel like conversation, not an exam. The plants worth keeping are the ones that grow with you, not against you. Crop 15. The pretty but pointless plant. Every gardener has one, that lush, glossy plant that looks impressive but never gives you anything back. For me, it was ornamental kale. Gorgeous to look at, useless otherwise. I'd walk past it every morning, wondering why I was feeding a plant that wouldn't feed me in return. Over time, I came to realize the garden isn't a museum, it's a relationship. Every bed, every row should give something: food, fragrance, shade, or comfort. When you fill your space with plants that only take up room, you rob yourself of that quiet reciprocity. Replace them with companions that give: rosemary for scent, basil for the table, or marigolds for joy. The best gardens aren't the prettiest, they're the ones that give back to the hands that tend them. Let's pause here for a moment. If you're still with me, I hope you're feeling lighter, maybe even relieved. Gardening isn't about guilt, it's about grace. If this list is making you rethink what's in your soil, take a breath and smile. You're doing just fine. And if you've ever grown one of these troublemakers, tell me below which one was it, and what did you learn from it? I always love reading your stories. They remind me that we're all still learning, no matter how many seasons we've seen. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Golden Garden Days. Every week, we share quiet wisdom for gardeners who've earned their rest but still love a good morning in the dirt. When you reach a point in life where bending low takes thought and lifting soil feels heavier than it once did, that's when gardening begins to deepen. It stops being about production and becomes about presence. Letting go of difficult plants isn't defeat, it's refinement. You've learned what works, what brings joy, what honors your strength. That's the kind of wisdom you can't rush, the kind only years in the garden can teach. There's a truth I didn't understand when I was younger, a quiet one that crept in only after years of bending over soil, after losing more plants than I could count. I used to think a good gardener grew everything. That skill was measured in abundance. But now, in these slower years, I know the opposite is true. The best gardens aren't the fullest, they're the calmest. They hum softly instead of shouting. They leave space for you to breathe, to wander, to notice how the light falls between the leaves. And here's the secret that most gardeners overlook. When you stop trying to grow everything, your garden grows you. It gives you back time, ease, and quiet satisfaction. It becomes what it was always meant to be, not a burden, but a reflection, a mirror of your season in life. I've come to see my garden as a friend that adjusts to me, not the other way around. When my knees remind me to slow down, I trade sprawling beds for raised planters. When the sun feels too sharp, I move my herbs closer to the shade. And when I find a crop that gives more than it takes, I stay loyal to it. There's comfort in that kind of companionship. I think of the seniors who write to me from all across the country, from Maine to Arizona, from quiet mountain towns to Florida porches. They tell me about the joy of small gardens, a few pots of tomatoes on the patio, a single bed of zinnias, a stretch of soil where mint grows wild and free. They talk about how it feels to walk outside, touch a leaf, and remember who they are beneath the noise of the world. Gardening, at this stage, isn't about production, it's about preservation, of memory, of movement, of connection. When you choose plants that love you back, the steady ones, the forgiving ones, something remarkable happens. You start looking forward to the work again. You catch yourself smiling at the smallest sprout. You begin to realize that life, like soil, still holds surprises for those who tend it with patience. That's the real harvest, not the vegetables or flowers, but the contentment that seeps into your bones when the garden feels like home. So, if you've been holding on to crops that frustrate you, wear you out, or simply no longer fit your rhythm, let this be your gentle permission to let them go. Your garden won't shrink. Because of it, it'll open up. Space is a gift. Into that space, you can plant ease, you can plant joy, you can even plant rest. I sometimes leave patches of bare earth now, not out of neglect, but out of respect, a way of saying, this is enough. And there you have it, 15 crops that simply don't deserve your sweat or your sore knees anymore. Each one teaches its own quiet lesson, that not every plant belongs in every season, and that knowing when to let go is as much a gardener's art as knowing when to plant. If this little talk brought you some peace today, give it a gentle thumbs up and subscribe to Golden Garden Days. Every week, we share calm, simple ways to keep growing, not just in your garden, but in spirit. Tell me below which plant you've decided to let go of this year, or which one you've found brings you the most comfort. I read every message, and I'm always grateful for your company here. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil, your heart in the garden, and your days golden.